Welcome everyone, this is Pineleaf Needles and you're listening to LOTRO Players News, where we take a look at the latest news in LOTRO and here at LOTRO Players. And this week we have with us Andang,
Hey, everybody.
Etheros,
I hate watermelons.
Dr Draculetta. As soon as
I think he's
Draculetta
there.
finishes laughing,
I
Oh,
think
sorry.
we killed Dracula.
Yes, you did.
and
Assault.
Cithrus.
Hello.
And
Watermelon.
tonight,
Etheros watermelon.
we have the review special for Update 15. But first, I have heard a rumor that the random number generation system likes Draculetta.
Well, maybe in one case it does. I wouldn't go far as to say it likes me because I still haven't got that stupid red horse yet.
Do we know that
But-
this was done by random, though? It could be just that there's an employee that likes Drac a lot.
And they're trying to throw off this whole RNG conspiracy thing.
Yeah.
Ooh, I never thought about that. What was it, about 2 weeks ago now, maybe? I put a post up that said there was a really odd post in the forums from Cold Blue that said to make sure that you updated your address because they never know what they'll find laying around the office. Well, lo and behold, what they found laying around the office was a holiday greeting card. And I did do a post on this so you can actually see the card itself. It's a pretty cool card. It's got a nice Lord of the Rings picture on the front. And inside was a 500-point code and a little handwritten note from Xdust. And then later on, somebody on the forums posted that they had gotten one as well. And Xdust did say that it was definitely something they hope to do more in the future, so make sure everybody keeps your addresses up to date. And he did also say that it was handwritten because a lot of people were saying it was just printed to make it look like it was handwritten, but he said actually no, those were all handwritten. He wouldn't say how many they did send out though, but they did handwrite them all.
Till their hand got tired.
Yeah, he knows
Pretty
they
much.
were handwritten because he wrote them all out, right?
Yeah, and he did say too that it was just random at who got them, but he won't say how they pulled the names or how it was random, but it was just random.
Supposedly some were international too.
Yes, that's what I was going to bring up as well. I haven't seen anybody internationally yet that has said they've got one, but he did state in that post that they did send some out internationally as well.
Well, that's because the international ones are still in the mail.
Yeah, it takes a while.
Especially with the Royal Mail because they suck.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
I know Lily Kate was saying she'll probably get hers in the spring.
Yeah.
But this is, I can't say that I have ever heard of any other game company doing this, at least to my knowledge. If anybody knows of any other game company.
At least random on a video game company. I do know that Looney Games has a tradition of sending out holiday cards with a very small game on it during the holidays.
I mean, especially the fact that we're almost 8 years into Lotro's cycle makes it seem really weird that just now they started doing this.
And I think the thing, like, the most surprising part is that they're just sending them to random players. Like, I know other games send things to, like, YouTubers or streamers or, like, big fan site blogs or whatever, but not just Christmas cards, basically, to random players.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I also wonder if there's some reason behind it, but I don't know. It's a Christmas card, so you
Personally-
can't be too negative about it, I suppose.
Yeah, that's pretty much my stance on it. Even if there is some like big conspiratorial reason or motivation they have for it, I'm just gonna enjoy the moment for what it is.
All right, very well then. And since this came with a 500 point code, I presume you are interested in the store sales to know what you could spend it on.
Not a thing this week. This week, the store sales is what I refer to the most of it you can get in Hobbit presents, so don't bother sale.
It's a long,
The,
long
the,
reference there, Jack.
the free sample of the week through December 4th is a 100% mark acquisition. And that last 90 minutes, you get one of those per account. The code this week is MX97T. Once again, that coupon code MX97T. One of those per account in the store this week, 20% off. Stat tomes, regeneration food, run speed boost, and 5% attack damage. So do not, I repeat, do not buy regeneration food, run speed boost, or the attack damage from the store. Just don't. It's a waste of
Just,
turbine points.
yes, especially if you know a cook.
Mm-hmm.
Right. All right. So what's on sale this week other than in the real market?
In the real marketplace, as you call it, they are doing their Black Friday sale. And that lasts until Monday, December 1st. So if you're listening live, you have a couple days. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, sorry you missed it. But here's what you missed. The Lord of the Rings Helm's Deep base edition is $10. The Riders of Rohan base edition is $5. Rise of Isengard base edition is $5. Mines of Moria is also $5. And the Siege of Mirkwood is $5 as well. So that
And you,
is some pretty deep discounts on some
Mm-hmm.
expansions.
and if you are a Steam user, you can also get the Helm's Deep Base Edition, the Steely Dawn Starter Pack, and the Quad Pack at those same prices through the Steam.
No, the Helm's Deep base edition is $9.99 on Steam.
Oh, okay.
So it's actually a little more. But the quad
Okay,
on Steam, the quad pack for $10 is an excellent
Yeah,
deal.
definitely.
All right
That
then.
would be the one I would suggest people to pick up if you don't have any of those. And the quad pack, of course, is Mines of Moria. Shoot, now I can't think of what else is in that quad pack.
Mirkwood, Riders of Rohan, and Isengard.
Isengard, yeah. So for $10, you can get all of those expansions. So that would be the way to go.
Yeah,
All
that's
right.
pretty crazy.
And it looks like we also have a post concerning the Mithril Edition, which is also 75% off. And that means US $4.95. And how does one get the Mithril Edition?
You go to GameStop. Actually, they are the ones that have that for $4.95, and the Mithril Edition. I cannot talk tonight. Is pretty good because that does include 2,000 turbine points. So basically, you're getting 2,000 turbine points for $5, which is a heck of a deal in itself. But you also get the Steed of the Horse Lord's mount, the Path of the Fellowship quest pack, which does include the Trollshaws, Eregion, and Moria. But note, the Moria is for quest only. That does not include the raids. Are the premium classes, which is the Runekeeper and the Warden, are the character slot that you got with the expansion pack of Moria, and you also get Lothlorien as well. And that is only at GameStop where you can get that. And that is US only. I have seen a couple different places people were talking about. They did get it to work where they were outside the United States, but they used like a United States address to get it, even though it's an online code, so they could still get it. But I don't know. They basically, if you're outside of the U.S., you're going to have to find somebody inside of the U.S. to buy it for you and give you the code, I think.
All right, very well. Now, concerning the steed, they don't show a picture of what the steed looks like in the article. It would be nice to see what it is if, in case there was someone there who was going to decide whether or not to get it based on the steed.
You can find it on old CSTM articles somewhere.
All right. Very well, that's the recommendation then. Look it up on CSTM or type in the name of the horse and take you there through your favorite search engine. So let's go into the site news then. And first, we'll begin with the LOTRO Player's Adventures, episode 39, The Deaths of Sithrit. Sithrit, I have a feeling you died a couple of times there?
Maybe just a few. Maybe like more than 10. Maybe like 20. I don't know. A lot.
Oh, you'd wonder what we were doing that got you killed so often.
Well, finally, we attempted the Dunhoth raid, and we did not even get past the first fight of the Dunhoth first wing. So
That
we
killed
declared
everybody.
victory. That killed everybody, to be fair. But I think I spent a majority of that episode with a monochromatic gray screen, waiting for.
I'm just feeling nostalgic that episode.
Yeah.
All right then. And then we'll then go into our video highlights for the week, an Unexpected Journey LOTRO trailer.
Yes, finally, for this week's video highlight covers something pretty amazing. Somebody actually took the audio from The Hobbit Unexpected Journey and got a whole lot of LOTRO scenes and made different characters look like characters from the films, and basically made their own first Hobbit film trailer. And it is pretty incredible how accurate they were able to make it in LOTRO. Especially with, the fact that most of the things from the trailer aren't actually in LOTRO. So they had to get creative in some places. Especially cool was the Gandalf troll moment that was in the actual trailer that they recreated in LOTRO. It was pretty awesome. And this is a fairly new YouTuber. This video actually just came out about 2 weeks ago, and so I'm hoping that they actually go in and do this for the other two Hobbit trailers, because that would be amazing, but even harder as you get farther and farther away from Eriador. But it would be pretty incredible.
Well, fortunately, you do. Oh, that's right. Dale looks in too good a shape in that particular instance.
Looks too good.
Yeah, it looks too good. Doesn't look like it's been sitting deserted for the last 40 years after a dragon tore to pieces or something like that.
Just get a sepia or black and white filter and you're good to go.
All right, let's go into part 20 of the family line, A Gap on Watch. And how is this coming along? Andy, you always say it gets better and better every week.
And it keeps getting better and better, Pineleaf. I can't believe it, but it's still going and it's still amazing. And if you have somehow resisted my recommendations this long, you're probably going to keep resisting, but maybe this week will be the week that you'll tune into this article, because it's awesome, and I really do highly recommend it.
All right, very well. And DG Inaxley, or Ali wrote part 4 of the story of Estelle, and for some reason he was wanting me to read all 4 parts. Is that today or some other time?
Up to you, Pineleaf.
Well, today I'll read only part 4, just in case he sends out a part 5. Let's read this, and maybe on a night when we don't have as much busy, on a night where we're not going to be as busy with the review, then maybe we could try reading the whole thing out for you. The journey was perilous and hard, the fellowship always on their guard. Over the mountains the ring-bearer tarried, a heavy burden around his neck he carried. The mountain pass ended in a deadly slope. Gimme declared that Moria was their only hope. But the dwarf doors were hidden and locked. The fellowship was once again blocked. But then the halfling solved the riddle. They walked in with Frodo in the middle. But the beast awoke with a wrath. We retreated inside as Gandalf led the path. The pillars were high and mighty in Khazad-dûm, but death got there first. Gimli cried at Balin's tomb. Then we heard the drums and many voices. We were trapped and ran out of choices.
Awesome.
Very nice.
It sounds like there's going to be a part 5 at some point.
There is going to be a part 5, I think.
All right, then let us look at Brax. Brax is not here this week, but he did leave an article for us, and that is his opinions of the Bjorning class, and he can sum it up in one word: bearable.
Ha ha.
All right, I guess he had a fit of bear pun in there somewhere. So therefore, he goes about his various things of what he felt about it and shows some early levels of the combat in the red line on a YouTube video, which he links in with the article. So therefore, if you're thinking of playing the Bjorning, you could look at his. You could also look at various reviews that we will give tonight. And I also have a playthrough that I am doing on my YouTube channel, on the Pine Leaf Needles channel, if you want to get an idea how the Bjorning works. So now let's go into our impressions of Central Gondor, the other major component of this update. And Andang, how's that going along?
It's going along just fine, I think, Pine Leaf. This week we are going to be reviewing Update 15. And so let's go ahead and go on into it. And as always, because Pine Leaf does such an amazing job every single time,
Uh-oh.
guess what you get to do again, Pine Leaf? You get to let us know what happened in the epic story this time. So, spoiler alert, this is a summary of the epic story.
Very well. And this is Volume 4, Book 2, The Dawnless Day. It begins where the previous one ended, with Lothriel, where she decides to send you out to the docks to speak with the ship captains to get their opinions of the seaworthiness of their ships and how ready they are to do battle with the Corsairs. And the captains give you an answer by showing you a huge blockade in which a prominent ship there is the Night Jewel, the flagship of the Corsairs. Which means that anyone who decides to try to break the blockade is probably going to get smashed. Now, with that done, you are then invited, actually, Lothriel is invited, to attend an audience on the flagship with the heir of Castamere, who is going to negotiate the future of the city. And of course, we are sent in her place. We go there, and essentially the idea there is we learn that they're saying that you should surrender. And of course, I reply by saying, well, you should surrender instead and get out of here. He laughs at us and tells us to walk overboard. Oh, well. So much for that. Well, after we get fished out of the water, we then get sent to Central Gondor, where we begin and first experience the Dawnless Day, which is one of the major events in the War of the Ring. And this is where the war is really picking up, because you're sending out this darkness to facilitate the march of Sauron's armies. And this is not only the name of the entire book, but of the chapter where you first arrive in Central Gondor. Now, your first great noble task that you perform is to light torches.
Yay.
All right. Yeah. All right. After doing that, you then get sent over to Linhir, where you will go to the border, which is on the border of two regions within Central Gondor. So therefore, it acts as a major quest hub for the most part of this storyline. And while you're there, you get sent out to a lighthouse which has been destroyed by one of the heirs of Castamere, and you're supposed to then try to clean up and take care of some of the enemy there. And after you get done doing this, you are then sent out to look for a missing child. Now, one of the recommendations I have that when you're doing this is that you do the side quests and that you do the epic part as you reach it in the side quest. In other words, you pick up the parts of the epic in the town and do all the town stuff. Then when you get sent out, you'll naturally go by the area. So therefore you're sent out to the lighthouse. You'll go to the lighthouse eventually during the side quest. You're sent out to find the girl. You will find her eventually when you go out and do stuff out there. Because the girl leads you to Roaming Star, and Roaming Star is a river maiden who helps to defend the Gilrain and Lebanon with her power over the river. And I sometimes wonder if she is somehow related to either Goldberry or the Blue Lady over in Ivendon.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that she might be. It's definitely a similar concept, but at the same time, she has different powers, it seems.
Well, yes, she does, but her powers are over the river,
Mm-hmm.
which I guess is natural since she is one of the sisters of the river. Then we are told of the host of dead that was led by a legendary hero called Thorngill. And in fact, we hear mention of Thorngill a few times before this, but there's a man there who said that he saw that the leader of the host of the dead was this hero Thorngill, and he sends out to go and find him. So we go out there, we find him. Thorngill then sends us on an epic battle to take back Peligir, which we do. This epic battle, so that's the new epic battle that we have. And after that, we then go and face that leader of the Corsairs that we faced at the beginning on the Night Jewel, and finally take care of the Corsairs and break their threat to Gondor. And that ends Book 2 of Volume 4.
All right. So, with that out of the way, what is your favorite epic quest or moment in the epic story? And let's start with Tharos.
I would have to say the first instance where you meet the quote-unquote boss or main villain for the book. You go on to, I suppose we can go into spoilers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we gave a spoiler alert.
All right. Yeah, you go onto the ship as a sort of emissary type person, and you sort of talk to them, and you get quite a few response choices. And from what I can tell, they don't actually mean anything, but I just like having choices. Even if they don't have an impact on the actual story, I just like having them to think I can have some sort of change compared to what other players do. And then later on in the instance, he ends up telling you to get off the boat and swim back to shore because he doesn't like you, obviously. And then if you don't, he ends up just attacking. I think Anling actually showed that happen in his video. I just like that sort of consequence for not doing what they tell you, which they don't often do in older parts of the epic, really. I just really like that instance in general, to be honest.
Yeah, it was a really good instance. Drac, what was your favorite moment?
Mine is the same. The one on the ship.
All right, and Pine Leaf.
It's very hard to beat the one on the ship, so I will have to go with that.
Yeah, I think I have to go the same, though the boss fight at the end was pretty good as well, I think. All right, so let's go on to our next question, which is... Let me scroll back up. I'm editing show notes while I'm doing this. This is the second book of a new volume. Is it a good build from the first book? With the first book, we had a lot of things established, and so did this build well upon the first book? Thalros.
Yep, pretty much, absolutely. They carry on the theme of the Corsairs sort of encroaching their way into Gondor while most of the soldiers are off east fighting Mordor. Uh, some of the, I think they actually mentioned the Ears of Castamere, sort of referencing ones from West Gondor in the west, in Central. They actually mentioned some of the ones who get killed in that the older zone, which is nice. They sort of keep the continuity going, which is a very important detail.
Yeah. Does anyone else disagree?
In many ways, it not only continues it, it also helps to resolve many of the things since this pretty much ends the attack on the Corsairs. So it's not only a continuation, but it's also a resolution of that particular plot line.
Yeah, and so do we think that this is one of the best ways that they've actually progressed things? Because when I'm looking back, I'm trying to think of how many times they've actually had just one book building something and then the very next book resolving it. I think this might be the first time where it was that quick of a turnaround, except for maybe
Well,
somewhere in Volume 1.
it has to be quick because Aragorn is in a hurry and he needs to get up to Minas Tirith as quickly as possible. And the entire point of going for the entire mission of going into Western and Central Gondor was so that he can break the stranglehold of the Corsairs so that he could bring in help from the people of Central Gondor.
Yep. All right. So, yeah, I don't know if it was actually the shortest one or not. So it did kind of resolve things. Do they have anything to set up future books? I don't know if we really have any indication of what
Well,
is
I
next, really.
just well, okay, maybe not the next couple ones. It sets up for Aragorn getting to the Pelennor Fields. But what's going to happen in between then? Yeah, that's not quite set up that I can see.
All right. Atharos, you gave a breath. Do you have anything else to add?
I think there was sort of some sort of weird thing going on in Pelagia, but that was outside of the epic. In the epic, I don't think there's really anything aside from what Panny mentioned about Aragorn.
Yep. Do we like what this book did as a whole?
Yep, that's my answer.
Yeah, I think that this is actually one of my favorite books that they've done so far in LOTRO. Um, Obviously, the end of Volume 3 and the end of Volume 1 were probably better, but this is probably the best second book we've ever gotten. Because normally it's just setting up stuff far later on. And so I think that that does kind of show the change in tone, where we're now this hero in Gondor, and we're getting things done very quickly. And that's because we're on the move and kind of have to do it like Pineleaf said.
Yeah, I do like that. I think you mentioned earlier about the fact that we actually get some resolution in the second book. It's a pretty big contrast compared to like Volume 1, where we go, what, 5, 6 books without getting any kind of good stuff happening for
Yeah.
us. It's always like the big bad guy always gets away with it for like 10 books, and then you have to spend ages trying to get close to him again. Having someone being able to win so soon is actually like at least a little bit of a milestone for us,
Mm-hmm.
some sort of small victory.
Yeah. And I also liked how they thought that they were entitled to um, the throne, essentially, and that's a villain we haven't really seen before.
And especially
Actually,
when he said during the end, when he essentially admits that he's not really an heir to Castamere, it's just a title he took to help his
yeah,
claim.
I remember that was actually something I was going to mention, that they actually pretty much say that they know they aren't actually, like, in terms of bloodline related or destined for the throne, but they know that if the people think they are, they're going to get a lot more support. It's actually shows a kind of clever thinking by them. We can actually see the way they think that actually makes sense.
Yeah, and it was really surprising how much of Gondor actually was starting to support them when we went around interviewing people in that one town. I was surprised.
Yeah, I wasn't actually expecting that, to be honest.
hmm But I thought it was really neat to see that, if Aragorn wasn't around, these people might have been able to get a portion of Gondor for themselves. And that's pretty scary. And so I think that that made a really compelling villain and is something that we haven't really had before and probably won't have again because that's really the only time you can do this kind of a story. Alright, so let's go on into side quests. Were there any side quests that you did not like? And let's start with Drac.
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. The ones that I've done so far, at least, I haven't gone through everything yet, but there's really none that really stood out to me that were annoying or anything, so to speak. So
Yeah, it felt like there was almost a decrease in quests, so it's a little hard to think of the amount of with the amount of quests we
and
had.
yeah, and it seemed like to me all the quests kind of flowed well together too.
Mm-hmm.
They were kind of woven in and out between the epic story fairly well, and like Pineleaf said earlier, a lot of the quest you could pick up and do at the same time you were doing parts of the epic as well. So I
Yeah.
think it just flowed uh, well this time than versus how it has been in the past.
Yeah, and CableNet Dragon from the chat says at least there wasn't any fishing bait ball quests in Central Gondor. And yes,
Oh,
thank goodness.
There
and
is
I
actually a
noticed that.
fishing quest, though.
Yeah, I noticed that in 15.1 they're increasing the length of that stupid paintball quest, but that's another matter.
Yeah, and the only quest I can think of that people would not like is the dog quests where you had to go
Yeah,
find that person's missing
yeah, I
dog.
didn't find Pebble all that much of a problem,
hmm
but I know you didn't like him.
Well, I mean, comparatively to the other transport NPCs, this was really
He's
good.
so
Yeah.
slow.
And I mean, you need at least one transport quest like that per area. I'd actually kind of like to see a little bit more of those. But at the same time, make the dog a little bit faster. Come on.
Yeah. All right. Now, there is one quest that annoyed me,
All right.
but it wasn't actually the quest itself. It had to do in this town which is populated by with corsairs and with these half trolls going all over the place, and the half trolls that are populating that particular area are the ones that have the same abilities as those crazy Uruks in Isengard, the woodcutters or whatever they're called, the ones that have about five different ways of stunning you and disarming you, and you spend half of every single battle without any way of retaliating. And the most annoying mob in the game. And now this was a half troll version of the most annoying mob in the game. So I
Yeah.
found that quest particular one because that quest, all the trolls in the area are that tight.
I mean, since I don't really have a question for this, we might as well talk now about the new half trolls. What do we think about them?
They are tough as heck.
They are
That's
tough,
all I'll
but
say.
I kind of like that. I kind of like that there's a tough enemy, and I know going into it, it's going to be a tough fight. I think for some classes it could be really hard, though.
Yeah, I've seen you find them in your series. It is way easier for you than it is for me.
And I
When I
consider
was
it really
fighting them on
hard,
my
so that's
Lawmaster,
surprising.
they, if I get stunned by them, they can take off at least half my health by
hmm
the time I can get like use my ability to shake it off, or it just runs out on its own. They do a lot of damage, and they have a lot of crowd control.
Yeah, I think the stun is probably their worst weapon that they have, to be honest. It just because they can just do a ton of damage after they do that.
And they have multiple ways of stunning, I can only think, because sometimes I think if I interrupt one of their stuns, they say, okay, I'll just use my other stun that can't
Yes,
be interrupted. Whap!
they actually have the same setup as the Uruks beneath Isengard and the
Right, yeah,
Woodcutters
those.
in the old Isengard. It's where they'll charge up one, which is AoE that you can interrupt, but they also have another one that will later just hit you with, and it's an 8-second knockdown.
Yeah, I mean that an 8-second knockdown that can't be interrupted is just evil.
Yeah, I think in
Thankfully, we
general,
have a way to shake
knockdowns
admin at this
longer
point.
than 2 seconds shouldn't even be in the game.
At least not in a solo quest.
Because then you're not playing anymore, and that's not fun.
Yeah, thankfully we have a way to get out of them with the new breakout abilities, but still, it's
Well,
annoying.
yes, but sometimes that's on cooldown because of the first time they stunned me.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially if you have 2 or more. Alright, any other least favorite side quests?
I'm not sure I would say quest specifically, but the fact that after I think it's east of Lynn here with that whole area, there's so many mounted enemies. Like you can't go 5 feet without pulling at least 2 or 3 of them. There's way too many. I don't.
Yeah.
There's just way too many in my opinion. It's just ridiculous in terms of actually just trying to get anywhere. You end up with a train of like half a dozen of them, and they do a lot of damage too.
And this is coming from the guy who pulls everything, so you know it's bad.
Yeah, there's a
Alright.
time and place.
Alright, what is your favorite side quest? And let's start with the Thoros.
God, picking me again. Um, it's difficult actually. I like the quests in the broken lighthouse because it was just like fun fighting your way up there to
Yeah.
finally get to the top. And there's a decent view from there. I like the quest line in the little wooded lake area with the maiden of what's her name, Roaming Star, I believe she was called. That was good.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd probably go with that one.
Alright, Pine Leaf.
I just enjoyed. Never mind.
Favorite quest would be the instance with Roaming Star.
Oh
Yeah.
well, fancy you.
Alright, Drac.
Yeah, the Roaming Star Daughters of Gilrain quest, or Sisters of Gilrain quest.
Yeah, I mean, that area, the way it was designed, just was something that was absolutely, amazing. We hadn't really seen something like that. We had, veil areas type things that were, hidden and sneaked away before, but we, hadn't really had a character be involved like that before the way she was, and it made for a really good instance. Alright, so that brings us into the landscape. So, let's first start off with a very basic question. Do you like the landscape with Central Gondor? And let's start with our landscape expert, Thoros.
Okay, now you're just using that as an excuse. I think, as you mentioned in your article, it is not drastically different from West Gondor. I didn't really expect it to be. I think they do differentiate it enough that I don't feel like I'm treading the exact same ground as before. So some of the Gondorian towns and cities are quite unique. Lynn here was kind of interesting in that it has a lake running right through it, and it's kind of messed up quite a bit compared to the West Gondor towns. Peлагir is obviously huge. Most of it is actually not really much going on, surprisingly, but yeah, I like it for the most part. I think the way you described it is pretty much what I would say is that it the actual assets, I suppose you could say, are reused from West Gondor, but the tone and the aesthetics is sort of different. It's a lot more bleak and war torn than West, which is mostly untouched for the most part.
Yeah, and this seems to actually be the most war-torn area we've had so far, I think.
Yeah, as a whole zone, I would say so.
I mean, even worse than Western Rohan?
Because Western Rohan, it was just the path from Isengard to Helm's Deep. Everything else in that zone was fine.
Yeah, okay, I guess you got a point there.
Whereas this zone, the entire zone seems to be ravaged, whether it be on the coastline or, almost up to that forest area where, that lady is. So it seems like the entire zone is under assault, which we haven't really seen before. And so I thought that that was really interesting and definitely added to the story, I think. All right. Any other thoughts on the landscape as a whole? Anybody?
The part with the Sisters of Gilrain is very nice looking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've said it before, but I think Turbine does a really good job at like showing war-torn things and like old ruins for some reason.
Yeah.
So I think they did a really
Oh,
good job at this. It
there's
seems to be like their niche that they have of being able to do that really well.
there was that one. I can't remember for life of me what it was called, but it's in like about 2/3 of the way into it, where there's this whole town that's completely wrecked. Like everyone's
Mm-hmm.
dead. There aren't even any mobs in there. You actually just investigate like hours after it's happened, and that's actually kind of unique in that for the most part, when you go to a wrecked place, there's usually mobs picking stuff over. But here it's just like completely abandoned. You can actually kind of feel the way it's um, just there's nothing left at all for the most, pretty much. And I actually really like that place.
Yeah. And Fredolus from the chat says, "Thank goodness the Vandals knocked all the swan wings off things first, ruining them."
That I will say, actually, I did notice there was a lack of swan wings. Well, there was still some, but there was a lot less. And the heads, that giant
Mm-hmm.
beard head dudes, there was pretty much none of those. I mean, there was a couple of them I saw, but way less than Westcon. So I'm very grateful that they became more picky with how they put those
Yeah, I
in.
think the wings are good. It's the heads that really bothered me. There were just so many in the previous area. And yeah, it
Well,
definitely
I think
did
is there.
improve your
Yeah.
landscape.
I think there was an excess of wings, and the heads just look stupid.
Mm-hmm. I think if they would have better placed them, they might have looked better, but just where they were placed and how many of them there were, it just didn't do justice to the last landscape.
Well, apparently the architects closer to Dol Amroth were more prone to overuse them.
All right. And what are your thoughts on the new Beorning landscape? Because we did get the new Beorning with this update, and they had a new landscape. So, what are your guys' thoughts?
Good, but small.
Yeah.
Very small.
That
Too
was
small.
very well summed up.
Yeah. Too bad you can't climb the Carrack.
Yes, I feel like
Yeah,
that
that
is
was
a
one thing.
big missed opportunity.
Especially because they tease it to you. They're like, "Hey, look over there. It's the
There's the
Carrack."
Carrack.
You can't get to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I hope someday if a dev has some spare time, they actually expand that instance to go over to the Carrack or something and have a little bit more going on. Alright, so talking about Beornings and their landscape, let's actually go into Beornings. So, do you like the new class as a whole? And this talk is probably just going to be between myself and Pineleaf, because the others haven't experimented too much with it. But if you have and you have something to say, feel free to chime in. So Pineleaf, what do you think of the new class as a whole?
As a whole, so far, I'm liking the class very much. I'm having a lot of fun with it. I've been playing 3 different Bjornings.
Of course you have.
Yes,
Oh,
I'm doing one on my main server on Winfola. So of course I'm doing one there where I am level somewhere in the mid 30s, around 37, 38. So I'm in Ivendom right now on that. I've got another one on Arkenstone, which I'm doing during the regular Arkenstone meeting time for the academy there. And the one which I'm doing the playthrough on, where I'm level 15. So therefore, obviously, that I'm doing it going through 3 characters at the same time. I'm very much enjoying it. So I'm having a lot of fun with them.
Alright, I have to agree. I did not get to play it too much on the live server, but I did on beta level it from 50 something to 75, and also from 1 to 20 or so. So I did really enjoy it on beta. I feel like that it's a nice addition and it has its own little niche. It's not being copied off of other classes. It feels like its own class, and I think that that's probably its biggest strength is that it feels like it belongs somehow. I after creating 9 other classes, I didn't think they'd have room for another, but it seems that they did. So Pineleaf, what specifically do you like about the Bjorning?
Ooh, what specifically? Well, well, of course, you could turn into a bear, but there's, and let's see.
I think my thing that I
Yeah,
like specifically about it is that it feels like the captain should have felt. It's a class that can do a jack of all trades kind of thing, and
right.
so it fills that role that the captain kind of left behind. And I think that's probably my favorite specific thing about the Bjorning.
Right. It's one of the. I'm trying to think of another class that has tanking line, a DPS line, and a healing line. It has all three of them that they're capable of doing because,
And really good at doing. From what I've tested, it seems like that they're great at all of them compared to other classes, but they're
well, I've
still
only, yeah.
Tries.
balanced.
Captain tries.
Well, okay, yeah. The captain. I was like, can the captain really do good enough DPS to do all three? I know technically they can, but I know whenever I've tried to do healing as a captain, I get squished.
I mean, I don't have a problem healing as a captain, and the tanking one's pretty good. The DPS line on the captain's probably the weakest one,
Hmm.
and I think
Yeah.
it's like Ending said. It's like that's why Bjornings are what captains should be because they do the jack of all trades
Well, and
thing.
I
They
think the
accomplish
main
it.
thing is that instead of having it all be in like passive buffs and things like that that you don't really have control of, the Bjorning, you're actively doing those things.
Right.
Well,
And
that's the thing. That's why it's like how captains used to be. Captains
hmm
used to actively buff people with specific buffs, and that's why people like the captain class. Now it's kind of more random, and you can only use certain buffs depending on what line you're in. And so, yeah, Bjornings are old captains made better.
all right, anything else to add, Pineleaf or Sithith?
All right. Well, one of the nice things is I like one of my favorite class traits I've ever seen are the honey cakes that they can make,
Yes. All right.
and which is actually scalable, which is a very big change from most class traits.
Yeah, that is actually nice. I wish that they would go back and do that for all the classes.
Yes.
All right, and what specifically do you not like about the Bjorning? And my main thing, and this might be yours as well, Pineleaf, is just the fact that, especially at low levels, the bear form feels like a waste of time. While yes, you do more damage there, you don't get to stay long enough in it to really enjoy bear form, I think. Especially if you have multiple mobs on you. It just feels kind of like a waste of time, especially at low levels.
I don't know. When I have multiple mobs on me, I build up, get into bear form, and rip them pieces. That's in fact, I can't do multiple mobs without getting into bear form. And oh yeah, that in fact that's one of the favorite things on the class.
Right, but at low levels, I mean, like really low levels, you don't build enough fervor to stay in bear form long enough because the
Well,
one bear
that's
skill
true
you
with just
have
about
takes it away.
any class where combats are too short that you can't do many of your skills. I have the same trouble with the
R-
warden where I can't get a gambit off because they're dead before I
Right, but I think when you're
finish it.
limited to where the bear form has one form and the other has another form, and you only have one skill in bear form if you pick a certain line, that seems kind of limiting, I think.
Well, if I guess because normally when I'm soloing, I'm choosing a DPS line anyway, so therefore, and there you have plenty of skills to choose from.
Hmm.
And one skill that you do have is the thrash skill, and that's a very nice skill
Yep.
since it builds up in tiers and gets more and more powerful as you use it.
All right. Well, what do you not like about the Bioning Pine Leaf?
I really haven't found anything yet.
Wow. Do you not like anything about wardens?
The one thing about the wardens I don't like is when they change the warden so that they keep their gambits when they go out of combat. And when you go into the next combat, now I'm stuck with, and that when you kill the last mob, your old gambit stays there, and you're stuck with that, and I can't get off my opening gambit because I've got the stat, and you can't use your gambit clearing skills when you're out of combat. That is so crazy annoying.
Alright, so in theory, you like the Beorning more than the Warden. Just like to point that out. Alright, so what, if anything, would you change about the class? You probably won't want to change anything since you haven't found anything wrong, finally. But for myself, I would like them to add more skills to the Beorning at the low levels, particularly in bear form. Even just one more in bear form, I think would make a big difference, and I think could really help the class out. Because when you're separating your skills into two different forms essentially, and you can only use them if you're in that particular form, it feels like that you just need a little bit more in bear form in some lines.
Okay, what line were you on, by the way?
Really, blue or yellow, I think, just doesn't have enough skills in bear form at the very early levels. And when you're trying out a new class, I mean, a lot of players will probably make it through higher levels, but some might just end when they see how little the bear has at the beginning. And so that's why I think they need to add a little bit more. Alright, and does it feel like a good addition to the class system, or does it just combine things from other classes? And I kind of covered this before, but what are your thoughts on it, Pineleaf?
Well, obviously, if I said I like it, how it goes along, yeah, it feels like a good addition to the whole to the class system, and it feels very nice class. It's different enough that it has its own contribution in there.
Alright, so let's go on to epic battles, and Draculetta, do you like the new epic battle?
Meh. Eh. I don't like it. I don't hate it as much as I hate the other ones. That's about the best I'm going to give it.
Alright, Atharos, what are your thoughts?
The watermelons aren't working, so bear with me. um, no, I don't. As I said before, I think they took out a lot of what I enjoyed about the Helm's Deep battles, and they replaced it with skirmishy stuff. And we already had a system that worked like for skirmishy stuff. They were called skirmishes. This is meant to be an epic battle, and to me, it didn't even feel like a battle, and it definitely didn't feel epic. So for me, well, they could have addressed the problems that were in the old epic battles and built on what was good about them, in my view. They did neither. They just wussed out on it, in my opinion, and just removed everything that was actually unique about it.
Alright, anybody else have any other thoughts?
Well, I will have to say that I have to agree. It felt like they tried to cross a big battle and a skirmish because we were on a side operation to help Aragorn get into the city. That was its main purpose. Was was to get to the gate, get them in so that Aragorn can get in. And to me, that belongs in the skirmish system because that's what the skirmish system represents. Those side battles that you're doing in order to support the main operation. It would have been a perfect skirmish, I think. No, well, they implemented like. Well, the implementation, of course, was trying to fit in all this big battle stuff, which, of course, would have ruined it as a skirmish. But I think it would have been better off if they designed it as a skirmish instead of as an epic battle.
Yeah, I think that's definitely good points. I do think that it still feels like an epic battle. It still has a lot of the same mechanics, but it definitely has a lot more skirmish in it. And I think that it could have possibly worked better as a skirmish, but I don't know if they have the ability to get the right scale for the thing at the end. Spoiler alert, where they have, Aragorn marching in with all his undead swarming over the others, but I guess they could have done that in a cinematic or something like that, because that's basically all it is just a real world
It was pretty
cinematic.
much that as it was.
All right, and so with the two systems in mind, so what we saw with Helm's Deep and what we saw with Update 15, what would you improve about the Epic Battle system for Minas Tirith? And let's start with Draculetta.
Don't use it.
Fair enough.
Sorry. Yeah, just
If they had to
either
use it, what would you improve?
that we don't have enough time on this show. Um, I don't know even to give you one thing they could improve because there's so much that I dislike about them.
Yeah.
Um, I like I guess the only thing I would say that they could do is kind of go with how they were trying to do with this new one and make it feel like you were actually doing something.
So
Which,
offensive?
yes, which they really did a decent job, I think, of doing that this time because I really did feel like I was participating. Um, so maybe lean more towards that. But I don't know.
Just maybe on a grander scale?
Yeah, unfortunately, I would say don't make it an epic battle, but I'm pretty sure they're going to because it seems like they're pretty invested in the system at this point. I don't know why, but they are. So make it grander on a more epic scale, very, very offensive more than what this one was.
All right. Anyone else have improvements for the Epic Battle system for Minas Tirith?
What I would say, what I think would make them better is I think the change they made with the new one, where you're actually moving around and sort of taking objectives, that is good actually. That is something they should keep and further develop on, because that was actually something I did like that they changed. Because with Home Soup, yeah, you are staying in one place an awful lot of time, and because you're doing that, you don't really feel like you're progressing anywhere. That's good, but I think what they need to do is go back to making the actual promotion system have an impact in the actual freaking battle. Because with the Pelagear one, I didn't feel like I was actually doing much with the actual promotion system. Like Zinger in the chat mentions that too. It didn't really feel necessary. I could have gone through it without any points at all and just done perfectly fine. I know that was a problem for some people with the old ones, because obviously going through it the first time is a real pain. But without having them actually having any meaning, it doesn't really feel like a battle, for me at least.
Yeah. And that reminded me how the first time I ran the epic battle, I was running an engineering line, didn't use its abilities a single time because I couldn't even find the things I had in the other epic battles that I could use to it. So I couldn't find anything to use to it, and that was driving me crazy. And so therefore, I essentially ran the entire battle without using any promotion points.
Exactly. There isn't, from what I could see, a single catapult in
There
that
are
whole
several
battle.
trebuchets throughout, and you can actually take out several enemies with them.
There was like maybe 2 areas I saw a ballista at, and there were maybe 2 areas that had set some barricades, but there was no way you could like pick them up and carry them with you and place them somewhere else.
Right, yeah, that wasn't there.
There was no tactics or strategy involved with the whole promotion sim. It was just, here's a place where you can use it, and then that's it. That's something they need to go back to, in my opinion.
All right, well, assuming that the system doesn't improve too much from what we've seen here, do we want to see the system used for Minas Tirith? Or do we want to see, like, an evolved skirmish system, or them try to do like a custom raid or something like that, or just something else? Or do we want to see them try to use the epic battle system again?
I think they should use whatever seems to fit. So, like Dave was saying before, that's how they want it to work. I don't think they should try to force epic battles in somewhere where it doesn't fit. Like, for the most part, it is a pretty big battle, so it makes sense. But maybe in certain areas, it makes more sense to have a raid. Like, say, Pelennor Fields, where things are a lot more split up and chaotic. You could maybe find a way to work it into you going and fighting off on the side by there. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Also, obviously bearing in mind that solos want to do a lot of this because it is a very key part of the lore. So, keeping people out just because they're on their own, I'm sure that's not going to happen because we've gone past that point a long time
Yeah,
ago.
but I mean, real quick, if you look back at what they did with Dunland or Inandwyth or wherever that was, where there was the big camp, and then you went in and actually assaulted into that camp, and I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds of enemies through there. And if they just placed enemies like out in the distance, do you think that that could work? Something like that?
Yeah. I mean, obviously it depends on the visual quality, and that's obviously a thing they also need to develop on. Helm's Deep was actually fairly decent, but it also helps that it was very dark, so you can't really see them that well. Pelargir, you don't really see the models much at all, aside from when you're going into the city, and then they look sort of weird. But yeah, if they make them look convincing enough, I think that would help with the immersion a lot.
All right,
Now, one of
so
the tricky things with the Pelennor Fields is that the Pelennor Fields is very much a cavalry combat on the side of the Free Peoples.
mhm.
And therefore, it would be, you can't, if you're going to be in the midst of the battle, then you're going to have to be mounted. And
Well,
getting that fit in
technically,
with the current system is going to be tough.
technically, it's, I think, after the Rohirrim charge, a lot of the Gondorians come out of Minas Tirith and then they're fighting too. And I
Yes,
believe they're
but
meant
even
to be
those
on
are
foot.
mounted ones that come out. You notice it's
All of them?
Imrahil
I
is
don't.
leading them because
Yep.
Imrahil has one of the few pieces of cavalry there.
I know at least when Aragorn and his men arrive, they're on foot. So I know there is at
Right.
least some unmounted combat in that battle. I don't believe all of it is on Pelennor Fields, at least mounted.
Why would Aragorn be on foot?
I don't recall him being mounted in the books.
I've always assumed he was mounted.
I'm pretty
Then
sure
why he
that
went through so much trouble to bring his horses along through the paths of the dead so that he would have
that's
a
true.
horse.
But I don't know, were all his men mounted though?
Yes, the entire Great Company was mounted.
Oh, well, there you go.
Well, yeah, the southern fiefdoms and everything, though. I don't think that every single one of them would have had a
Oh,
horse.
the ones from the southern fiefdoms, they probably were not mounted.
Which is what I mean. At least some of the combat would have been on foot.
Okay, you're
But
right.
at the
And we
very
may be
least,
coming up with them.
the amount of mounted combat that's involved here would require them to, at least out in the distance, be showing some kind of mounted combat.
Yeah, I think to at least some degree they're going to need to make mounted combat work in instances. And I don't think they actually managed to get that to work yet, outside of quest ones, which are a lot very small scale.
They certainly haven't shown an example of it working yet.
Yeah,
Which
especially
makes
with
me
the lag.
very worried because mounted combat already has a big issue with lag, and in the epic battle system, especially before it was optimized, there was a ton of lag going on there. And I'd imagine if you added in a bunch of mounted combat enemies moving around really fast, that would just do horrors for lag. So
There's a reason why they're waiting a year and a half before they do the Battle of Pelennor Fields.
yeah, I don't know if that'll be enough time still though.
We'll see.
So final vote, yes or no? Yes being this should be an epic battle. Should this be an epic battle? Pineleaf.
No.
Draculetta.
Definitely no.
Ethelros.
I think there's no better system they have right now that works for it, so yes.
And Sithrith.
Sorry,
Yes.
what?
Do you, do you think the Minas Tirith should be an epic battle? Yes or no?
Question mark.
Fair enough.
A definite maybe.
I think
Yeah.
that it should, but they really need to be making a lot of improvements to it. What Tharos is right. I think there's really no better system that they could use except for maybe going back to what they kind of started with Dunland and just putting a lot of enemies out in the distance and
Back into Wolf
having
Crest.
having you fight in this closed-in area. I think that's really the only other option that I can think of. I don't think that skirmishes are in a place where they can be used for this type of thing.
You know, it
Um,
depends. If we are with the ones who are on foot, as you were saying before, then I know some commentary about ancient battles said that sometimes a really big battle becomes very much localized and each individual area feels more like they're in a skirmish within a bunch of huge number of skirmishes around them, and that's what's being decided. But yes,
right,
you
but
want to, though I think the players will want to feel like they're doing something major to it, and that's the
exactly.
reason why the skirmish system may be tricky on that. Unless you're given a very important objective that you are going to achieve that could be pivotal to the entire battle.
It almost feels like what they should do is have something that's kind of a combination of skirmishes and epic battles. An epic skirmish.
Which I think is what they
Like,
tried
because,
to do a little bit with Pelennor or
Yeah,
Pelagia.
that's what they tried with Pelic.
yeah. But, yeah, it's like you said, it needs some upgrades to work for Minister.
Hmm. All right, so moving on to a new system that, well, it's not so much a new system, but a system that was added in last update, the Essence system. Has this system had enough changes to be actually worth messing with all the different things that are involved in it, or is it still not up to par with just regular old armor? Theros.
It's
Difficult to talk about whether this is worth it to actually go into essences because, for one, I've never been a min maxer and pretty much never will be, and I also haven't really played much lately to actually try to go for it. On paper, it doesn't really seem like the time investment is worth it, given how often you're going to be replacing equipment. It's the same old problem they've had of have this set last for like 3 months and then you're into a new area, a new armor set. It's difficult to say. They haven't really improved the system as a whole with this update from what I've seen. They've added a few new essences, so they're not just stats anymore. They have changes to your abilities or your cooldowns. But yeah, nothing too creative from what I've seen. It still has many of the same issues they had before that we discussed in the previous review.
All right, any other thoughts?
There's an instant system?
No, not really.
Okay, well, do you see how this system could be useful then?
I could see, I think, as I said before, I can see it being useful to min-maxers who really want to fine-tune their builds to get the absolute most out of their stats. For anyone else, it just seems like a waste of time.
A waste of inventory space.
Yeah.
And yeah, a waste of effort because they're just going to use quest items and stuff because that's the easiest way to go with it. You don't want to worry about this stuff too much. So yeah.
Between allies and mounted combat allies and all the crafting and all the other stuff we have to have in our inventory, it's kind of annoying to have all these essences floating around as well.
Yeah, I just trash most of them.
Mhm.
It's just while it is nice to have some other kind of loot from landscape mobs because there really isn't anything aside from what is it, crafted, trash, allies, and essences, and occasionally loot boxes. There really isn't a whole lot of variety. So while it is nice, I would have liked something that's actually have value to me. But no, well.
Baldagar from the chat says, "I think there was enough for it to be for it to be useful in update 14, but with update 15, the new class essences are completely broken, and based on their plan for 15.1, they will be undoing people's grind by making them even more worthless. One good thing about the class essences is they basically let you make a piece of gear and never need to upgrade it, because the only thing that will change is the number of sockets and the base stats, which is not much.
I think it's also worth to bear in mind Zinga's point, saying on the plus side, good for the wallets of us who don't care about it. This actually has had a good effect, I think, on the economy, which, as we know, isn't exactly the most interesting of MMO economies, but it does add something else that people can buy and sell and trade around.
That's true,
So I
but I
will give
don't
it
know if
that
enough
it does add.
people are involved in it to make it worthwhile. Even
Yeah,
there.
I mean, it's better than not having them, I
hmm
guess.
And is there anything you could improve to make the system worthwhile? I can't think of what they would need to do, because I think I'd just rather have the regular armor, unless the Essence system armor was so much better that I just had to have it. I guess everybody agrees, so let's move on.
It's really hard to even talk about this. Is right now it's kind of a broken system because
Yeah.
they kind of just put it in and didn't really do anything with it, or it
It's
was only half ready to go.
hmm
That's the thing. It's not even really broken so much as it is a shell.
Yeah.
Like it's like a little bit of it's there. You can kind of see kind of what they're going for, but there isn't really enough to work with it. You have to wonder why they bothered putting it, because I don't think there's really that much value of it as is.
It's like they gave you tires for a car without the car.
Or just like the hubcaps.
Hey, some
Um,
people collect hubcaps though, don't they?
and some people collect essences, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Alright, let's move on to the global chat channel. This was updated last update. Has the world channel improved or worsened since it was introduced? Or is it still the same?
Maybe a little bit worse. It's hard to tell. It's just generally kind of not great.
Yeah.
Again, I haven't really played much recently, but for the time when I was playing, at least for Land Revolt, at the time I was playing on, it seemed fine. That's my own experience, at least. As for whether it's really improved or gotten worse, I'd say it's just the same. You're going to get the same people posting and getting banned or coming back again. It's the usual.
Yeah, I think it's not too different from GLFF, and then it's kind of a worldwide way for everybody to talk. But I think World, because everybody has it on by default, and so more people obviously know about it, you get a wider potential pool of trolls and unsavory types.
hmm
Personally, whenever I play on Lantern, which I know generally when I play is at different times than Athelros, whenever I play, it seems like everybody's discussing some recent event in the real world or political thing, and that's not generally what I'm super into reading in chat when playing an MMO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any way they could improve the global chat system?
I don't think so.
No, it's. I think it's probably going to be true no matter what. There is always going to be a channel that's going to appeal. Now, if you broke it up into different channels, you might theoretically might have the ones who just want to chatter in one place and the ones who have a useful thing. Usually, though, 90% of the people are just going to do everything on one channel. It's like
hmm
how people currently use the World or GLFF are constantly using it for trade because they felt, oh, because it's easier to be on one channel
hmm
and not
Right,
worry
like
about it.
when before the world chat thing was a thing, and we had just had to rely on user created channels. Everybody still just used GLFF for even global OOC and global trade because everybody was just using GLFF anyways, so it was easier. So everybody just uses the one channel, like Pineleaf said. It's the path of least resistance.
I think the setup they have now, where it was like 3 hours of a new free to play character, you can't use the world chat, is as good as they're going to get
Yeah.
towards at least cutting down on some of the trolls and such. In the end, this is a people problem of being anonymous online. You can't really do too much about it aside from step on them when it happens, which is probably a different discussion you could have of whether their moderation and their GMs are actually doing what they're supposed to. But that's not really related to the world chat, I don't think.
Hmm. Zinger makes a good chat that some servers are not big enough to have a fully sustainable separate channels. And so I think that that's a good point, and the world can definitely be used for some good things. I definitely am glad that it was added, but I think that it also definitely comes with negative effects as well. Alright, let's go on to roving threats, which is yet another new type of thing that was added to the game with this update. So was it worth Turbine's time to add this new roving threats into the game?
It's hard to say that without knowing exactly how much work it
Yeah.
took and how much resources it cost them. If it's like not that much, then yeah, I think it's nice to have another thing to do on the landscape. Having those big mobs out as well, just having more stuff on the landscape to do is good. Obviously, if it took like a gigantic amount of resources, then no, God no, there's almost like no impact whatsoever. It is like you get a quest if you have a certain amount of rep with that faction in the area, and then you go and do the quest, and then it's like another 24 hours you can come back and do it again. The rewards for it are minimal, pretty much worthless, just like a rep item occasionally if the mob itself drops one. If it doesn't, well, you still get one from completing the actual quest. It really has like almost no good rewards from doing it at all.
Mm-hmm.
And the actual mob itself doesn't do much damage aside from maybe the spider, which has some very irritating insta-kill dot from what I've heard.
Alright, any other thoughts on roving threats as a whole?
Well, I've only run into two of them. Well, okay, I've avoided most of the others that I've seen, but I've only fought two of them. One of them was the spider, and I believe I had. In fact, that would be seen. I think both of the battles that I have fought are on my playthrough. They're already posted because they all happened during the first section. So therefore, so happens I encounter them when there's already someone fighting them. So I just joined in the fight to help with that. So therefore, it really didn't have much of an impact on what I'm doing. And to me, they just feel very much like the old shard droppers.
Mm-hmm.
It may be a little bit more powerful than some of them because I think shard droppers, well, depended on the area because I think they tended to be very early on they tended to be normals and later on they tended to be elites, and now here we are at level 100. Now they're elite masters, so it seems like a type of progression they're normally going on those things.
Alright. And so let's move on to just some extra questions that I had. So this update did not have a level cap increase. Did it feel lacking, or was it okay without one? Atharos.
Um, it was fine with that one, in my opinion. It is nice to get XP, but in the end, it's just a number. Getting skill points or class points for completing certain quest lines is enough of a reward for me to keep playing through it. I mean, I'm obviously someone who's invested in the story anyway, so it's not a big deal for me whether I get XP or not. For other people, I imagine it could be, but it's hard to say whether it actually, did impact other people's enjoyment. But for me, at least, it did.
Yeah, I think it was fine, and especially considering how good the story was with this update, that it wasn't that big of a deal. But at the same time, I we only had 5 level increase this year. And so I hope that we have at least 10 levels next year, because I wouldn't want to see a pattern of only 5 levels a year, personally.
Well,
Yeah.
it probably depends on the size of the areas and stuff. Like I know some people were complaining they could not get 5 levels out of Western Gondor. So I think if you could that together, this will help to fill things up for those people who are having trouble finishing up the leveling system.
Right, but at the same time, we had been having 10 levels a year, and now all of a sudden we had only 5.
I
Well,
think
yes.
if I think in this case, having a level cap increase for this update would have made more people unhappy than it would have made happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. And at the very least, it would have caused them a lot more work and things be less polished, probably.
Yeah, I don't think it would have been worth it.
Mm-hmm. All right, and this for me is a fairly tough question. Would you rather update 14 and 15 had been an expansion, or do you like it the way it is being done as updates? And Sithwith, you gave a so why don't you go ahead and answer this since you did
Busted.
play
Well,
through update 14.
on it, at first, my gut reaction was like, well, I would have definitely liked it to be an expansion. But then thinking about it a little bit more, I'm actually much happier that they broke it up because I think it gives them more time to work on individual systems that need more work. I mean, obviously, I know I've spoken in other past episodes about how I think Update 15 definitely needed more time and polish. So I think that had they tried to pack all of Update 14 and 15 into a single expansion, it would have been a lot worse. So breaking them up into separate updates, I think definitely helped them bring more polish to the systems and landscape and quests for both updates.
All right. Anybody else have any other comments on this?
Well, it certainly was a bit of an advantage for me since I'm a lifer, so therefore I didn't have to worry about buying a new expansion.
That's
That
right.
too.
I think while the whole expansion hype and the big marketing stuff is nice and exciting at the time, I don't think bundling it all together as an expansion would have been the best move for it, both in terms of what Sith mentioned about the polish and just I don't think it would have been a good package deal because there's not really a big hook with this expansion. Yeah, there's the new class, but in terms of the
And the epic
world and the
battle.
place and the epic battle, but the place you're going, like, yeah, well, you threw me off now, Barney. Yeah, I don't think that would have been the best move. I like the level cap raise to it would have presumably have been 10 levels if they had bundled it.
Yeah.
And this sort of, I think it actually works better as an update because I think it kind of keeps a consistent level of content output over a big burst, which actually I prefer in general. So yeah, I'd rather have been like this than as an expansion.
Here's my take on this. Well, everything you said I definitely agree with. I think that it is much better with updates, especially from the point of a consumer. I think that there's a few issues that come up as well. For one, they're not getting as much money this year out of their players as they have in previous years. And they also had 2 rounds of layoffs this year. Not saying the two things are related, they could have had layoffs regardless. But at the same time, it does make you wonder, maybe is LOTRO earning less because it didn't have an expansion this year? And there's really no way that we'll have an answer to that. I also really like the hype that comes with an update, or with an expansion. I think that helps out LOTRO in a big way and brings in a lot more players into it. That being said, I think the Beorning kind of got that marketing push from players talking to other players, at least from the kind of traffic we had on LOTRO players. We had expansion level traffic for the Beorning. So I think that did kind of make up for the fact that they didn't have an expansion this year. I still think, though, that from a financial point of view, it might have been better to have an expansion for LOTRO this year. That being said, I wish they'd have even more updates per year and break up to, like, for example, we had 4 quest areas with this time. I wish that they would have separated this update into 2 parts and had it spread out even more throughout the year. Um, and if that means that you pay for this whole area up front and then you get like part one and then part two, I think that would be a better way to do it, and they'd be able to polish each part more in theory. Um, so the next question is, do you think we will, and do you think we should see an expansion either next year or in the future of LOTRO? And let's start with Pineleaf.
I'm trying to think what would be a good expansion because the only Osgiliath I don't think would be a good expansion material. If anything's going to be good expansion material, it would be Minas Tirith.
Mm-hmm.
And but I'm trying to think how you can do an expansion with Minas Tirith without having the Battle of Pelennor Fields, and they're already said that they're separating the two.
Right. Well, keep in mind Mordor does come later.
Well, we do have more. I don't know. I just can't see an expansion with Mordor.
Yeah.
I it just doesn't feel right because we're not going to have a major role in directly in the downfall of Mordor. We know who has the major role there. We are going to be there to make sure that what's left is not going to burst out and tear up. When we go into Mordor, it's going to be pretty much free the slaves that are at the farmlands down in the south or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Atharos, what are your thoughts?
Um, I don't really care if they bring out an expansion. Frankly, I'd rather they didn't, both because I can't afford it, and yeah, that's kind of a bias, but still, and just I prefer having consistency over big flashy,
Mm-hmm.
chunks. That's just the way I feel about it.
And it seems like that's the way that the market is moving, especially when LOTRO was having $40 expansions, as opposed to, the industry standard being 30, and then, the higher tier being even more than 40. It does seem like that it's a better move for the player having these updates instead. Any other thoughts on if we're going to have an expansion in the future?
In the end, if they think it's going to make them more money, they'll do it.
Yeah,
I mean, that's sounds like an obvious statement, but that's pretty much the way it is.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to our next question. How did the difficulty of this zone feel in comparison to previous zones? I think you probably talked most about the difficulty of this area.
It's hard. I'm gonna just come out and say that because, like, compared to any other zone, except maybe from what I've heard, the 75 to 85, no wait, 85 to 95 for West Rohan now is meant to be really difficult. But this, like, yeah, we talked about the half trolls, how hard they hit, but you get any like 3 mobs hitting you as a squishy, like I was a lore master, they will rip through your morale very, very fast.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was watching your series of you playing the champ, and yeah, they weren't doing as much to you because you have so many heals and obviously a lot higher mitigation. But even then, like occasionally they would bring you down pretty hard, fast without you even noticing. It's definitely noticeable how much more damage they do, and obviously with the added CC, I think there's a lot more stuns and disarms in this zone compared to previous ones. I think that on top of the damage increase makes it a lot more dangerous.
All right. Any other thoughts on the damage of the zone?
Yeah, it seems to be a more. There are many times where I think I took a particular quest in a more circumspect manner in this zone than in the previous zone. Trying to avoid trolls and making sure I don't get multiple trolls and stuff like that.
Also, the mounted combat is a thing too. The mounted enemies in this zone do a lot of damage, but even though they added 10 levels to mounted combat for your war steed, you still get way out damaged. Like I need to
Mm-hmm.
spam my heal just to get through like a couple of normal mounted enemies.
Yeah.
That's how much compared to how it started out, where you could like kill half a dozen of them without even getting remotely low. There's definitely a scaling issue. Like they're not matching up properly.
Well, I found that there are some areas where you can't go 10 feet without getting five other mobs on top of you. There's one point where when you see my video where I think I had six mobs on me at one time. I eventually decided that my war steed ran off, and I spent the either late that episode or early the next episode asking if anyone's seen a missing pony around somewhere.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not gonna like claim that this is a bad thing per se. I think I actually enjoyed this like worry of actually getting overwhelmed. But I think for someone who plays a class that maybe can't burst AoE as much as a Lawmaster can, or isn't as tanky as say a champion or guardian or captain, like a hunter or runekeeper is probably gonna have quite a hard time, especially if they're not as well geared and have as good virtues as like say I might have.
Yeah, I was surprised that there really wasn't that much complaining going on about the difficulty this time around, even though it was increased. That I saw anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've browsed the forums like occasionally. I haven't seen a single thread about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
There was 2 threads on it.
was there about the difficulty in general or the half trolls in particular?
The difficulty in general.
Hmm.
But
Okay.
in general, from what I see, they seem to be just less compared to. I think update 13 is the best comparison to make there because there's where they made huge difficulty changes.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing in comparison to those.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to final thoughts. So, were there any secret areas or things that surprised you about Central Gondor? And let's start with Drac.
It's not really a secret area, but something that kind of surprised me was the lighthouse area.
Mm-hmm.
I liked how they did that, and then I liked how you could see the top of it that was like tumbled down to the side, and you could actually go in it and on it. That was a nice touch, I think. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think that that's actually one of my new favorite areas in LOTRO. I really enjoyed Helm's Deep, and I think that this is actually even better than that because you actually get to go and fight through it. And it's a really nice addition to the game, and especially when you consider the rest of the zone, it really stands out. Any other secret areas or things that surprised you? Anyone else?
I think the statue of Thorongil when you go into Peligir, like when you walk in, I was not expecting to see that giant head of Aragorn. But when you think about it, it makes perfect sense because he is the one who liberated the whole area from Umbar in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's famous for it. It makes perfect sense that they would want to celebrate him. So you just walk in and you go, oh, of course, there's a giant head of him there.
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't there be?
Yeah, his reputation precedes him.
Right, and Fredos from the chat says there's a little sand castle on one of the sandbars you visit for a daily quest in Lebanon.
Yes, I did find that.
And he also
That's very
says
nice.
that there's a maroon corsair on the island for no apparent reason. And he said, I
believe
think
the
they got
quest-
bored and built a sand castle.
I believe the quest mentions that the ship, yeah, they crashed there and you end up taking stuff from them. It's kind of funny.
Mm-hmm. Right, anything else?
Not that springs to mind, although I did like the fact that there was just so many ruined ships in there, like pretty much
Yeah.
all along the coast.
Mm-hmm. All right, what was your least favorite part about Update 15 as a whole? And let's start with Pineleaf, because he never likes anything.
All right. The least favorite thing about Update 15, undeniably, absolutely, positively, what they did to the music system.
Yeah. All right.
Well,
Anyone
yeah,
else?
can I? Does that need elaboration?
Probably not. Anyone else have any other parts that they don't like about Update 15 as a whole that really stand out?
I mentioned the epic battle and my reasons for disliking it. That is
Hmm.
my main and most significant issue.
Actually, there was another item that I didn't like on it,
All right.
and that is the fact that you've got four reputation areas, and I
Mm.
think that this zone did not need four reputation areas. And I cannot think of any good reason for wanting rep. I mean, it sounds like the only thing you're getting Kindred for, if you went for Kindred, is for one cosmetic pet.
Yeah.
People
Whoop-dee.
like pets.
How many rep areas did the expansions have? Because those were like the size of the whole year of content that we've gotten.
West Rohan had two. East Rohan, I believe, had
East
four,
Rohan had
five,
four.
four, and that was for Hypebold.
Yeah,
So
that's for Hoodball.
this zone should have had at maximum 2.
I think two would have been the right number.
Maybe three. They
May
could have barely scratched in, but
No, I
yeah,
don't think
four
three would
is.
have been appropriate. Either one or two.
All right. So let's move on to what was your favorite part about Update 15 as a whole? And let's start with Drac.
I would have to say the story.
All right. Pineleaf.
Yarning.
Okay. Metharos.
I mean, like the landscape and story are pretty much like interwoven at this point. Just,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the Central Gondor in itself. I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, Sauron's power is basically causing the story to be the way it is, and that greatly affects how ravaged the landscape was. And I think because the landscape was so ravaged, that really did greatly affect the story this time. And I think that this is one of the first times that we've had the landscape really have an effect, especially when you consider some of the supernatural things that they included.
Yeah.
My favorite part probably has to be the story. It was by far the best second book we've had in any volume, and I just think that it was great. It built upon what was already set up in the previous area. We got to see more of Jajax. It was great. So I think that they did a great job with the story this time around. All right, so it's on to scores. So time to give
Should
scores.
I read Lilikate's notes first?
Right after this.
Okay.
So time to give scores. A quick reminder that F- is the worst update LOTRO has ever had, and A+ is the best update LOTRO has ever had. And so now, Sithrith, why don't you read what Lilykate has wrote us?
All right. So Lilykate could not be here, but she is here, well, in the chat and in spirit, and she left us a note on what she thinks. So, she says, I've played the first part of the new region and loved it. Story is great. Landscape I love. Side quests are fun, the ones that she has done. And she says, the big spider is adorable, if really aggressive. And she says, I like to live in the Bjorning starter zone. It is so pretty. I love the farm and all the animals. Not a big surprise for Lilykate. I have made a Bjorning and played a little on her, and I like having something new to experience, but I find myself not logging into the tall folk much. Must do better, because Bjornings, are not hobbits. Epic Battle and Essence Systems all get a meh from me. I have not been seduced enough to use either of these more than the Toad Dip I have experienced. Roving Threats, not another new system. I haven't met any, and if I did, I am sure Lilykate would use her play dead skill until it went away. Unless it was a really cool critter, then I would sacrifice myself for a good photo opportunity.
The big spider.
Yeah, the big spider,
Yeah, the big
Lilykate.
spider. Global chat channel. I don't blame the channel, I blame the users. A useful tool if used responsibly. Otherwise, I have to turn it off when it just gets too silly. Agreed. Music system. There were some very good elements in the new music system update. The instruments were/are better tuned. Sadly, this was a work published that wasn't yet ready, as many players within the community were reporting when it was live on Bullroar. We do need some fixes and tweakings to the new system, and all the community await new instruments, better ranges, and so forth. For now, we await a rollback to our old system, and I hope to hear more about how Turbine are going to take this system forward. I know they, the devs, can make it fantastic. I look forward to future improvements. My personal feeling is that the entire new Gondor regions, including Path of the Dead, should have been released as an entire package, even if that meant waiting longer for it to be released. I think it could have been presented and marketed to the customer as a new update. I don't mind not having a cap increase. I find the new zone does kick Hobbit bottom, and I like it. Final thoughts. I need to explore further to find secret areas. Least favorite part about Update 15 was the unfinished music system, and her favorite part was the landscape, hands down. Should I say her score?
Yep.
Okay, Lily Kate's overall score for Update 15 is a C+. They get the plus for posting on forums and interacting with the community to help solve the music system issues.
All right. So, Sithrith, do you want to give a score for this update, or do you feel you haven't had enough experience?
Will say my score is I for incomplete because I have not completed it.
All right. So let's go on to Drac. What score would you give this update?
I am going to give it a C+. All
right, and why?
That's due to the fact that the epic battle I still feel is it's getting better, but it's got a long, long way to go. They released the Essence system basically unfinished and unready to be released. They just kind of threw it there and said, do with it what you will. So with those two things, I feel that really brought the expansion down to a C+, or I should say update, sorry, down to a C+ for me.
All right, Atharos.
It's going to have to be a C+ for me as well. The story landscape, as usual, is top-notch. I'm not going to be able to actually comment on the Beyonding at all because I haven't played it, aside from like a couple of minutes in beta. So that does not factor into my score at all, bear that in mind. But the epic battle especially really disappointed me because I was looking forward to see what improvements they could make, and in my opinion, it was worse.
I saw what you did there, by the way, too. Bear that in mind.
Oh, I wasn't even intentional. Oh, it's getting everywhere. Yeah, the Essence system, as you say, is just pretty much a shambles. It's not even there, really. What else was actually in that? But that's this thing. There wasn't really a whole lot in this update that I actually played around with that much. So, yeah, good content. The epic battle really brought it down for me, though. So I'm gonna have to just stick with the C+.
All right, and Pineleaf.
Landscape A, Questing A, Bjorning A, Epic Battle C, Reputation System D, and the music updates a solid F, thus giving a complete total of C+.
Ah,
Wow.
everyone's giving a C+. Ah, I was gonna go worse. I don't know. It'll be so easy to average though if I give it a C+. All right.
Be honest with yourself.
Seriously though, let me talk through with what I think, and then I'll give my score after I talk through it. So obviously, music system was an absolute disaster. It sounded like, but Lily Kate does make a good point that they have been listening and have been working to get it fixed. But at the same time, they should have been listening in beta when they told them that it shouldn't be going in. They might have had the build too optimized to turn it around at that point, though. The story was, like I said, the best Book 2 story we've ever had. And I really, really enjoyed the story. The side quests were great. There wasn't really anything negative that I found about those, except for maybe the dog, but it was much better than, say, the cow from Wildermore. The landscape was much more dreary, but it did have a story reason, and so I think that they did a great job. Plus, there was the whole coastal area that really fit the enemy that we were fighting. The Bjornings, I think, are a fantastic addition to the game. And I think that between them and the story, that does bring it up to a C plus, even in spite of the epic battle, because at least this time you don't have to pay for the epic battle. It was free, and I think that that really did make it a lot more. I was gonna say bearable, but now I don't want to because bear puns. um, Makes it a lot more okay. Um, so overall, I think I have to give it a C plus. They made some big mistakes, but at the same time, I think that they did some really great things with the story and with the landscape.
Right. So it looks like that from our viewers that 45% of them felt it should be a B and only 28% said C.
And that was B as in Beorning. Um, and so yeah, 28% did say C, but the good news is finally that the top two answers were B and C, and you know what's between B and C? C
A C
plus.
plus.
So there you go.
Well, it sounds like they gave it. Though I think, though actually, since Moore said B, I think they gave it a B minus instead of C plus. But
Probably. But
Don't
we were
ruin
close.
I mean, we've never been right about this stuff before, so.
That's right. Give it to us this time, Pineleaf. Come on.
Okay.
All right, and 15% did say A, 8% said D, and 4% said F.
I'll bet most of them are members of bands.
Yes, or people who don't like epic battles. All right, so
Well,
that does conclude our review, Pineleaf.
all right. Thank you, everyone, for listening to our review. And we'll now go into our donations. So a big thanks to Flossin for supporting us on Patreon. And also a big thanks to Gumps Gang for also supporting us on Patreon. And if you would like to help LOTRO players, simply go to the donations page where you can help support the Players Alliance through Patreon. There will there you will find rewards, including a mention on the podcast of your choice, or even a guest position on Locho Players news or adventures. We do not have any reviews this week, which is probably just as well since we gave a very big one over the week. So let's go into featured comments. And Kaylee left a comment about this week's poll. Kelly voted D for two main reasons. One, what was in U15? 1. Quest areas, solo duo Pelagear battles in which half the objectives were impossible to complete and also impossible to earn platinum overall medal. What was supposed to be in U15? Quest areas, solo duo of the Fellowship battle, a music system update which is getting reverted, a level cap increase which was later changed to the imbuing system, something else which is escaping me at the moment. 2. What was there seemed very small. There cannot be any more than half as many quests as there were in Western Gondor. Can there? Now, someone will actually provide a quest count for each of them and make me feel silly. Don't get me wrong. What was there was quite good. There is just very little substance to it, to my mind at least. Now, I would have to say that I based my scores on what was there and not necessarily on what was originally proposed. And I
Yeah.
suspect that many of us also did the same.
And I think with game development, you kind of have to, just because they think that things are planned, and I would much rather them tell us something that they're working on and then take longer to make it work right than to either release it or just never tell us about what they were thinking about doing. Um, at the same time, don't tell us you're doing another PvMP map unless it's really happening, please.
Yeah. It
Oh,
is.
yes.
I think it is worth pointing this stuff out, though.
hmm And also, I do think that the quests were more than half. I think they were a little bit less, but they flowed really, really well, which made them go a lot quicker. But I did have more episodes with this update than I did the previous one. And I think that's because there's more instances and things like that that take a bit more time.
Yeah. I think a lot of the West Gondor quests are actually taken up by the daily system, which you didn't do.
Right.
which a lot of people didn't do. So that probably has some sort of impact.
Mm-hmm.
All right, very well. And now Tiny Bell also left a comment on this week's poll. And Sithrith, could you please read that?
Sure. Tiny Bell writes, with the music revamp, I'd give the update an F. That whole thing was horrible for the community. Leaving that aside, though, I give it a B. Also, it might as well be a C. Despite the bugs and it being too easy, I do enjoy the Polar Gear battle. I really do enjoy the new quests and zones. Also, I would agree it looks a bit small. Heard good things about the Bjorning, although I haven't gotten one myself. So, because it's somewhat too small and quite buggy, I'd say a C, but I'm having fun, and that's the most important, so I opted for a B.
All right, then. B for Bjorning, then.
Oh,
And
God,
now,
watermelons.
and now for emails. Ali writes, Hail, friends. It's been a long time since I got a chance to write you guys and girls, but it doesn't mean I haven't been listening to you. I've just been busy with studies and some extra volunteering work that I started, but I get the chance to log into LOTRO and try out the Beer Man. Arg, Bear Man. So far, I'm loving it, but my only complaint about it is that it doesn't look that different from my man captain. I hope Turbine changes its look a bit to make it taller and make the bear also more unique and bigger. Speaking of bigger, somebody told me recently that my kin, Casual Raiders, is now considered one of Brandywine's bigger kins. Yay! It's been a fun experience to gather casual gamers on a server like Brandywine. And speaking of fun, as some of you know from my Twitter, I have been writing part 4 of my poem saga Estel, and I am sending it along with the previous parts. Hurrah, Pineleaf! Hope those 4 fans of Lotro poems aren't disappointed. Speaking of disappointing, listeners of podcasts, please feel free to send me their Lotro/token inspired poems, even short ones, to T Tolengenraiders at gmail.com. You'll see it in the show notes so that you can get it spelled properly. I'd love to feature more poems from other fans of the podcast. As always, excellent podcast. Love them and keep up the good work. All right, very well. And Catherine also has a letter. And Drac, could you please read that?
Sure. Casperman says, Hi, I saw you were grading the last update, and I have been very disappointed in their treatment of Bjorning since just after level 70. Suddenly, no more Bjorning armor. I thought I would have my Thane from Hypebold go and barter for the Bjorning armor, which looked to have good stats. Surprise! When he got the armor, it was bound to him, my Thane, and he couldn't give it to the Bjorning. Oops. Even though they had gotten it for all my other alts as they leveled up to 85. Another horrendous experience in Western Rohan trying to do battle on horseback with the Warg and Half-Orc riders is so frustrating. They run from the mounted bee swarm attack, they run right out of whatever their invisible boundaries are, then suddenly you can't attack them and they streak back to their own little zone, their health fully restored to max, and your poor little Bjorning has to start from scratch. It took me over an hour near Orsley to kill 12 mounted mobs. I never want to do mounted combat against humanoid enemies again. It was terrible and not fun at all. I have alts of every occupation and never had to deal with that before. Having them flee in terror from bee swarms does not do the Bjorning any favor. So there's no armor with might, only hunter/berg/warden armor. In fact, if you try to get armor from the skirm camp, it says quite clearly that's all they sell for medium class armor. Bjornings might as well go naked. Turbine has failed us seriously by not thinking things through and not planning for the armor past level 70. They also need to do something about the awful experience mounted combat is for the Bjornings. It's not that bad if you're chasing down an animal, but when your mounted foes get to regen themselves because they've ridden too far, that stinks. Thank you, Kazarin.
And I think that goes back to what I said previously. They should have tested beyond level 50 and given players the auto level in the beta.
They should
Well,
have given this
as for
update more.
chasing, as for mounted foes, I think that's always been a problem. It's just that he must have been very good at managing and not having it happen to him, because I've had it happen with other classes quite a bit.
I think the main thing is that there's a skill that they're actually afraid of here, whereas
I
before,
think
Yeah.
the Beast Swarm fears, then it makes him run away.
whereas before it was just that if you ran away too far, then they'd be cut off. But this is actually there's an actual skill that's causing it, and that's an issue.
And
All
honestly,
right.
it's not even just testing beyond level 50, it's testing in general. That's one of the principal problems with this entire update, as far as I can see.
And listening to feedback as well with the music system and things like that. So
Well, that goes hand in hand, to be honest, with us asking them to delay it and not launch it like this. They do it anyway, and that's part of the communication issue.
Yep.
All right. If you'd like to email us, you could send a note to podcast@lotroplayers.com, and you can also follow us at Twitter, The Players Alliance @Players Ally, Lotro Players @Lotro Players, Andang @PVMP_Andang, Braxwolf @Braxwolf, Sithrith @Sithrith, Draculetta @Draculetta_72, Etheros @Etheros, Lily Kate @LilyKateBuggins, Mystery @MysteryXOX, and Pineleaf @PineleafNeedles. You can listen to our Player Alliance shows, which goes live 3 times a week on Mondays at 8:30 p.m. server time, DDO Players News. On Thursdays at Loto server time, we have Guild Wars Players News. And on Saturdays at 8:30 p.m. server time, we have Locho Players News. And server time is United States Eastern Time, even though I suspect that Guild Wars probably has a different server time, but I don't know
It
what
Likely.
does,
that
but
is.
it's 8:30 Eastern.
Oh,
I
it is all. Yeah.
I would like to mention that, Guild Wars Players is a new show, and we love to
Yeah.
have a great big chat room helping us launch Guild Wars Players. We will be posting that we're launching the site sometime this next week, which is very exciting, so feel free to go over to guildwarsplayers.com and also join us live Thursday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern for our first episode of Guild Wars Players News with Sithwith Drac and maybe a few other guests or hosts.
And you could join us for the chat at lotroplayers.com/live. And you can also join us on Landrival for Lotro Players Adventures each Saturday at 5 p.m. server time. Thank you, everyone, for listening. This is Pineleaf Needles reminding you to skirmish responsibly.